We want to begin here this evening with what appears to be another embarrassment for the Secret Service.
How could an agency with the responsibility of protecting the leaders of the free world end up putting America at risk? How can an agency with the responsibility of protecting diplomats from around the world end up in the center of Hollywood-esque scandals and gossip? It all started in 1865. Abraham Lincoln signed into effect the act that created the Secret Service. However, Lincoln's goal was to create the Secret Service as a branch of the Department of Treasury to stop the widespread use of counterfeit currency in the United States after the Civil War, not to create a protection agency. Over the years, the role of the Secret Service has expanded into their more well-known area of work, executive protection. After the assassination of President McKinley in 1901, the Secret Service began assuming the role of presidential protection, assigning 2 full-time agents to the president. After this, the agency slowly expanded their role even further into protecting the president's immediate family, the vice president and his family, and all cabinet members along with their families. Along with that, all visiting diplomats, presidential candidates, and former presidents and vice presidents are protected. Congress expanded the protection of the Secret Service from 1951 until 1976. However, as the Secret Service assumed more responsibility, the agency began to falter. These blunders within the Secret Service have put Americans at risk of severe political turmoil, and their sloppy behavior has put the future of America in jeopardy.
What's going on over there? And more importantly, is the president's life in danger?
During the 1960s, the Secret Service was entirely unprepared to protect the president. During that time, Agent Newman was placed in charge of President Kennedy's presidential protection. He relayed that before being hired as a Secret Service agent, he was taken to a range for target practice and handed a manual, but after that there was no other initial training. On his second day on the job, Agent Newman reported that he was placed in the rear of the presidential limousine, handed a Thompson submachine gun. Yet, he had never been trained on how to use the Thompson submachine gun. Clearly there was not sufficient training for the agents, and this should have raised red flags within the agency. The day the president was assassinated, the agents were untrained and not fit to do their job. 9 of the 28 Secret Service men who were in Dallas with the president were sleep deprived, and few had been drinking while traveling with the president, an activity that was clearly prohibited in the Secret Service rulebook. Now, Agent John Norris, who was present during the assassination, alarmingly explained that except for George Hinckley and Clint Hill, many of the other agents basically just sat there with their thumbs up their butts while the president was gunned down in front of them. Bolden was one of the agents who could hardly believe what he was seeing. Not only were they in an initially inadequate state of mind to successfully perform their job, but they also failed to follow through with the duties of Secret Service agents. Standing in the Secret Service office in Chicago just after the president was shot, he wrote that he heard a fellow agent cry out, "I knew it would happen. I told those playboys that someone was going to get the president killed if they kept acting like this. Now it's happened." Unfortunately, this improper behavior by Secret Service agents is not an isolated incident. Abraham Bolden, a former Secret Service agent, is cited explaining, "The biggest problem I ran into with the Secret Service when I was an agent was the constant drinking. When we would get to a place, one of the first things that the other agents would do was to stock up on liquor. They would drink and then we would go to work." Nevertheless, the biggest problem with what happened on that day was that the Secret Service failed to do their job and protect the president. Although then Secret Service Director James Rowley would later testify that none of his men were impaired when they reported to work that morning, all in all, the president was killed and it's the Secret Service who failed to do their job. Now, although it may not seem like a big deal that then Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson took over the presidency, it is actually a really big deal. The people elected JFK to lead them, and when LBJ assumed office, race riots and anti-war protests skyrocketed and were constant throughout the country. The Secret Service is responsible for placing the country into a time of turmoil and unrest because they did not carry out their job of protecting the president.
Videotape of an incident that took place less than 15 minutes ago at the Washington Hilton Hotel when shots were fired at President Reagan.
The Reagan assassination attempt was another Secret Service blunder. After speaking at an engagement at the Washington, D.C. Hilton, the president was being escorted out of the special presidential walk exit of the building, which was built after the JFK assassination to protect the president. The Secret Service did not require Reagan to wear a bulletproof vest to this event, as it was deemed to be a low security threat. The president only had a 30-foot walk from the hotel to his limo, but the Secret Service had allowed a group of unscreened supporters and protesters to gather 15 feet away from the president. This is how John Hinckley Jr. was able to fire 6 shots, with one striking the president in the chest. Reagan was rushed to the hospital after the Secret Service discovered that he had been hit with a bullet in the side. Even though Reagan survived the attack, given the lack of security precautions made to protect Reagan, the Secret Service is incredibly lucky that Reagan was able to survive. There was lack of foresight and lack of planning that almost put the nation in political distress. The nation elected the charismatic and personable Ronald Reagan to office, and if he had been killed suddenly, the nation would struggle to move forward. The Secret Service does not protect the president, they protect the stability of American politics.
The White House has also been shot at and hit with bullets from a semi-automatic weapon.
The 2011 White House shooting exposes a complete failure on the part of the Secret Service. Not only were shots fired on the White House, with bullets hitting the bulletproof windows of the first family's living quarters, but it took the Secret Service 4 days to figure out that they had been shot. Their slow response and utter oblivion to the attack raises serious concerns about the capability of the Secret Service. Luckily, the first family was not home, but once again the Secret Service put the president in potential danger by not protecting the White House and by not reacting quickly.
On what some are calling the biggest scandal in the history of the Secret Service.
In 2012, 11 Secret Service agents were found guilty of hiring prostitutes and bringing them back to their hotel room in Cartagena, Colombia. These agents were supposed to be preparing for the president's arrival in Colombia the following day. Instead, they were more interested in personal indulgence for the evening, also implying that they would be up late and unfocused for their duty the next day. This makes the U.S. look sloppy and ignorant in the eyes of other countries.
We're not just representing ourselves. We're here on behalf of our people, and that means that we conduct ourselves with the utmost dignity.
The Colombian government will now view the U.S. in a more negative light, and not to mention this puts the president at risk in a very dangerous country. The sloppiness of the Secret Service once again almost disturbed the nation's stability and threatened the safety of the president. If this sloppy behavior continues, our nation's safety will only continue to be at risk.
They are supposed to be the best of the best.
The 2014 White House jumper event also highlights Secret Service failure. Even in 2014, over 100 years after the Secret Service had become devoted to protecting the first family, an unacceptable event occurred. Omar J. Gonzalez ran 70 yards across the White House lawn without any obstructions. Then he made it through the front door of the White House, running into the East Room, where he was finally tackled by an agent. Gonzalez made it further than any other fence jumper had in the past. Luckily, the first family had just boarded the presidential helicopter and they were not home. What makes the Obama assassination attempt so significant is that President Obama had been struggling to get anything passed with the Republican Congress. He was going back and forth with senators and the Speaker of the House to get any significant progress done on his agenda. If Obama had been assassinated, it would have caused even more disorder in an already distressed government. So how could this have happened? Well, it turns out that the Secret Service had already ruled out using dogs as a form of protection.
There were a lot of officers there, and there was concern the dogs might attack them instead.
And it also turns out that the White House alarms were no help that day either.
He was able to do this in part because a White House alarm had been disabled by the Secret Service due to a noise complaint by a member of the White House staff.
Overall, the Secret Service has shown that they are not a disciplined and upstanding group of agents. They have made many mistakes over the years, and it will take time for them to heal these wounds. What is more alarming is that every time something goes wrong, the agency's operation methods are always at fault. We depend on the Secret Service to do such an important job, and if they do not alter their ways, our nation is bound to face unnecessary adversity in the future.